after watching Caregiving, we have all kinds of emotions from watching this, right? There will be anger when you watch the full doc. There will be anger that's involved. So first I want to welcome the director and senior producer of Caregiving, Chris Stearns. Sure, give him a round of applause. Chris is a two-time Emmy Award-winning and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker. He's done several works in the healthcare industry. He's worked on more than a dozen films for Frontline, 3 presidential biographers, and an independent documentary on gerrymandering Slay the Dragon, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. And as I mentioned, an award-winning filmmaker. Hope you caught our discussion earlier this week and earlier this month about caregiving. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thanks so much, Doug. That's great. And big shout out to WBGO. Huge fan of public radio and NPR. So thank you so much for hosting this.
Someone who is a lifelong caregiver is our next panel guest. Mary Martha Ford, caregiver. Clorinda Jean Johnson Porter Ford was her mom. You lost your mom in February of 2024.
I did.
And it was a long journey for you. But you, and we'll talk about this, you've been a caregiver since you were 9 years old. One proud moment that we could share with you is that she is now an academic advisor of the School of Arts and Sciences here at Rutgers Newark. Congratulations on your last Monday she started. We'll get into her story in a moment. I also want to thank Lauren Snedeker for being with us. Lauren is an assistant professor and director of the Aging and Healthcare Certificate Program, I should say. Core faculty member at the Hub for the Aging Collaboration School of Social Work, Rutgers University School of Social Work. Dr. Snedeker specializes in gerontological social work with a focus on aging experience. Welcome, Dr. Snedeker.
Thank you so much.
So, Chris, as we watch this preview screening, a lot of emotions because caregiving touches all of us in some way. Now that the doc is out there, how do you feel about this film?
And so many different things. It's a 5-year journey that I was on in making this. You guys see me, but there's a huge team that went into making this happen as well, and so you get all the joy and the agony and anguish of working on a story like this. And then also our team then goes in separate ways, and so there's a little bit of sadness that comes with the joy of seeing it go out into the world, because that crew that you've been working with so intensely for so long separates and parts. But to me also this is a profoundly meaningful piece of work, because it's one where it's filmmaking for a purpose. It's filmmaking that's not so much about what you see on screen as what happens next, as what happens with you in the audience, as what happens with the other audiences that I'm speaking to, that people that see it that I'll never get a chance to meet, sadly. Because I feel like it's a profoundly American story, and it's one that really brings home how important this is for all of us, and how we also have the power to write the next chapter in our personal care stories and our country's care story. And so, as I said, it's about you as much as it is about the film. And so for this evening, I'm so thrilled you're all here, and I want to hear from you and respond to that, but also look to you to take this story to your own families, your own communities, your own workplaces, and not spread the word, it's not because it's not about the film, but help be part of changing culture of care, of bringing care into. I feel like we've lost a bit of sense of family and lost a bit of sense of caregiving, and I hope that this sparks thousands, tens of thousands of conversations across the country and inspires people to bring kindness back and empathy back, and that when you hear from Lauren and when you hear from Mary Martha, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. When you hear from Jacob and you hear from Matthew and the others in the film, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about.
We have lots to talk about with the director of this documentary. But there was a reason that when I introduced Mary Martha Ford that I didn't mention her famous sibling, because you probably are always referred to as Billy Porter's sister. The amazing Broadway star Billy Porter, Mary Martha Ford. You have a very famous brother who's been all over the world. But as we've learned in the documentary, and many people know, a lot of the responsibilities of caregiving fall on women. Yeah, there are still millions of men who are caregiving, but for you especially, taking care of your mom, and then you can tell the story about after your father passed when you were only 9.
Yes.
You've been the main caregiver, so this film has to hit you very hard.
It does.
Tell us about it.
So I am originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Shut up, it's fun.
And my mother was born with a neuromuscular degenerative disease that they were never able to name. And my father died unexpectedly when I was 9. And my brother Billy and I are 10 years apart. And so he was already in college at the time that my father died. And so I was thrust into adulthood, not even realizing then that my mother had a condition. So like Jacob was saying about his mom, like she's mom. Like she, he looks at her and doesn't see anything. So I didn't realize that there was anything differently abled about mommy. And so I had to become an adult, and I started balancing checkbooks and paying bills and running the household and figuring out what other type of care she needed over the years. And so I was some form of a caregiver for 35 years. When I was younger, she did not need as much care as she did as the disease ravaged her body.
Dr. Snedeker, your initial reaction when you saw caregiving?
My initial reaction was politely, but it's one that I've seen before. I have spent most of my professional career as a social worker working with caregivers, working in long-term care, working with older people who are not only receiving care but also providing care, working with paid professionals, unpaid caregivers as well. And since I began my social work career and grew up professionally in nursing homes and long-term care in Westchester County, New York, it's a story that I have not endured personally, but one that I have tremendous empathy for. And I feel very privileged, and I thank you, Mary Martha, for sharing your story. And it's just incredibly moving and important for me as a social worker and an educator to make sure that every social worker, at least at Rutgers and beyond, is prepared to meet individuals who have experienced this, who are, as Rosalind Carter would say, right, have experienced it, will experience it, are receiving care, what have you, wherever they are in terms of the care universe, that social workers are prepared to engage with support, with validation, with no judgment, and adequate resources, and advocate for political or policy-based change.
I give you so much credit, Dr. Snedeker, because a lot of times our choices for a career are based on personal experiences, but for you, it was just because you care, right?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. When I started my MSW degree at NYU, I just happened to get assigned to work at a senior center for my internship, and I just completely fell in love with the work and really got a chance to understand how the aging experience occurs, how we're all aging all the time, but especially for older adults, and what can determine that and what can impact that. And I just continued on, and I'm proud to be able to bring that information and the stories and continue practicing to students and to be a part of things like today.
Chris, we came so close 3 times in the history of the U.S. to having a better situation when it comes to caregiving. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that and why you felt it was important to intertwine the historical context of caregiving in this documentary.
I'm so sorry. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think for a lot of us, the experience of caregiving is one that generally happens overnight. You get a phone call, and there is a sudden, someone's had a fall, someone's had, as with Matt and Ken Lyer, someone's had a stroke, and then life changes. And from that moment on, it's a scramble, and it's a hugely stressful scramble, because one finds oneself dealing with this crazy patchwork that we have in the country today: city, state, federal support, Medicare, Medicaid, depending on age, eligibility, the type of condition that one's dealing with. Maybe non-profits will step in and help, and it's just a hustle. And even at the best of times, it would be hard to navigate. And these are very much not the best of times. And so the idea of taking a breath and step back and figuring out why it is that one is dealing with this crazy patchwork is, utterly impossible. And so we wanted to do that. We wanted to tell the story of how we got to this point. And what we quickly saw that was there were no, it's not part of our curriculum. You're not taught it at school. Our care story, it's this essentially human story. It is all of our stories, and yet we're never told anything about it. When we think of the Great Depression, we think of the Great Crash in 1929. When we think of the Second World War, we think of the Isle of Victory in Europe and Pearl Harbor, and we don't think of the women in that war and how they fought and won childcare rights. When we think of Vietnam, we think of the divisions in the country, but we don't realize how that changed disability rights fundamentally. And so much of what we get with the ADA and so on is all born out of that war. And so we wanted to try and change that. We wanted to try and show that there is not just, that our history is not just a history of heroes and presidents and so on, but is also a care history, is also a social history. And you see in that, in the clip here, you have that campaign in 1932, and there's that fight between 2 visions of government, and we all know that that's exactly what we're living through today, basically 100 years later. But I don't want people just also to just look at Washington for answers and for help. I hope that this story is also a personal story, and as I said a moment ago, one where we feel like it's our story and it's our responsibility to write this next chapter. And as Paul Irving, one of the people, says, who do we want to be? And that by talking about this history, we can see with clarity what we can be and what's possible, and set about being a part of writing this new version, this new chapter.
Bradley Cooper at the start of this screening said, caregivers are heroes. Frances Perkins, talk about a woman with strength. Everybody knows the picture, right? She was the only woman in the picture behind FDR when the Social Security Act was signed. That tells us something. I've always thought women are smarter than men. Men in the audience may say, I don't know about that. But I've always felt that way. Someone else who is a hero is Mary Martha. And I know you do not look at yourself as a hero. But you've spent your whole life, much like my sister Jan has done, dedicating yourself to the care of others, and your mom who meant so much to you. When you look back on this long journey, what have you learned about yourself and what have you learned about mom?
What did I learn about myself? I'm tired, I'm exhausted, still. What did I learn about myself? Resilience. I have learned how the system works. I can probably speak to a doctor as if I were a doctor because I know all of the medical terms. I have learned how to be extremely organized. I have learned how to advocate not just for my mom, but for other people. I have learned that burnout is real. I'm still learning how to take care of myself. What did I learn from my mom? Through this journey, I learned that she was a fighter. I learned about her resilience. I've learned about grace, how to maneuver and move through a situation with grace, with kindness, with love. I've learned about her strength, her wanting her own dignity, her wanting to still be as independent as possible, and how difficult that is as things were changing in her life physically. I learned how to comfort her, even when I could not necessarily understand what it was that she was going through because it was her lived experience. But me being on the outside and watching her go through this and the pain physically, emotionally that she went through, I learned how to walk with her. That's what I did.
And I imagine every day you relive that journey.
I do. There are times now that I think about, did I do everything right?
So, my sister.
Was mommy pleased with me? I think about the fights that I had with her practitioners. I think about when we made the hard decision to move her into a nursing facility. And she was part of that conversation, and she knew that she needed to do that because I was unable to give her all of the care that she needed, and how difficult that was, that type of decision. And I think about the fights that I had with staff as I was advocating for her, making sure that she was going to be treated the way that I knew that my mother needed to be treated. And also advocating for the staff, realizing that being a paid caregiver is back-breaking work. And oftentimes the people are not given the respect that they need. They're not given the tools that they need to do their job adequately. And so also wanting to advocate for them because they're not paper pushers. No shade to anyone that is a paper pusher. I push papers, right? But their job is physical. And if from the top down, right? If they're not being paid their worth, and they're not. If they are upset with how things are being run, you come in and you visit your loved one and you see people look burn out. You can hear the murmuring as they're doing their job. It's very easy for someone to say, well, if you don't like it, then get a different job. But until you have had that experience and understand what it is to clean someone, to brush their teeth, wanting to treat them with dignity, wanting them to, as these people are facing their own mortality, wanting to make sure that they're okay, but the people above you are not treating you right, it can come out in your work. And like I said, you're not pushing papers. These are people that are dealing with our loved ones. Yeah.
You talked about, with me just briefly before we started this, about the fact that as a Broadway star, actor, singer, Billy Porter, had to be in different places, so a lot of the responsibility had to fall on you. But some good things happened because Billy is an actor. You were able to go to the Actors Fund, a nursing home.
Yes. So my background is also theater production management. So we both worked in the industry. And
Oh, you're not just a caregiver?
No, I'm not just a caregiver. I'm multifaceted.
I see.
I also grow my own herbs.
And they're available.
So I'm very fortunate that in my family with my brother that we get along and that we were on one accord when it came to how to care for mommy. I'm also very fortunate that my mom was able to speak her mind about what she wanted and what she didn't. And, but he had to go and work. And so I made sacrifices that allowed him to flourish and to do the things that he did. And whether you call it God, the universe, the spirit, whatever it is, how it worked out for us is that when the time came and mommy took a fall and she really needed more help, we were able to, as you were mentioning, emergencies happen and then you're scrambling. We were able to scramble and we moved my mom in 9 days. I moved her to be closer to us and I moved her to New Jersey. And what's the rest of the question? What was the rest of the question? Oh, about siblings.
Well, I mean,
And how it felt.
just the whole, you
The
have a different,
dynamic.
yeah,
So,
you have a different situation.
So I had a
than lot of
different
people.
relationship with my mom, right? Mine was more intimate because I saw things that he did not see. She would never let him clean her, and he didn't want to do it because he's like, I'll do it wrong. And that's true. That's true because he would not know the intricacies of it because mom and I had a dance. We had our own dialogue. She could look at me and I knew exactly what it was that she needed, that she wanted, the care. But were there times that there was a little resentment? Of course. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything was fine and that yes, I wanted to be a caregiver. No, I can't say that it was fair. It was just what I was charged to do. And so it worked out with my sacrifice, which allowed him to flourish. We were in the position to give mommy and to make sure that she had received the care. And so while I was physical, he was able to do more support of me, the support that I needed to be able to support her.
I think I have to have you contact my sister because you two could have quite a lot to talk about. You
I'm
mentioned,
sorry, but I also want to say this, but not every family is like that. And I'm sure that you know people, or if it's you yourself, that it's not like that. And I've seen it in other areas of my family where the children, if they are the ones that are charged to care for their parent, they can't be on one accord or no one wants to do it. And let's be clear, relationships between children or parents sometimes can be very complex. I tell people, your children aren't really under any obligation to do anything for you. You just hope that you've raised them in a way that they will think about you when you get older and want to help you. Because that's the truth. Because I've seen it. Children be looking at their parents like, no, I'm not going to do it. For various reasons.
yeah, you mentioned the word dignity, and I think it's a huge thing. I know my mother did not want my brother Don and I to change her, and so we got the easy way out when it came to that. Dr. Lauren Snedeker, when you are talking to people when it comes to caregiving and whatnot, can you take us into a conversation that you have? So I don't think everybody understands what a social worker actually does sometimes. We hear the term, but we don't know the day in and day out. Take us into a day of Dr. Lauren Snedeker.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Well, when I wake up? No. So in my past practice, practice, I mean, a day as a social worker on the ground working in long-term care involves, morning meeting, talking about any recipient of care in a facility, what's going on, how is their insurance status, how is their health status, who can we call to talk about any concerns or changes. But it's a lot of also navigating complex family dynamics, like Mary Martha was sharing. As a social worker working more with families and caregivers and care receivers, it was so important and continues to be important to me in terms of my, educator role, to make sure that we're not expecting like the wrong things from a family caregiver, if that makes sense. We need to approach every caregiver, family caregiver, paid caregiver, with tremendous empathy and appreciation, and really, essentially, like start where they are in their experience. We should not judge a family member for not being in complete enthusiastic feelings about being a caregiver. We need to honor and recognize and hear more stories about the actual real experiences and prepare all staff, social workers, any professionals for engaging in this work, so that we can hold the space and try to reduce conflict when we can. We hear a lot about these days, like families and cutting off, going no contact. And I'll say, as a therapist myself, as a social worker, like that happens sometimes if there's a lot of trauma involved, and understandably so, but it's not the ultimate goal. We want to keep people together. We want to try to figure out how we can do that by honoring everyone's story and trying to resolve challenges and shifting mindsets. Like in your family, Mary Mother, as you were saying, what can someone contribute? If it's not hands-on direct care to the care receiver, then what about caring for you, the primary caregiver? Long-distance caregivers, caregivers who are handling maybe the finances as opposed to the direct every day, and just being a unit together. And not every day is pretty, but if we kind of keep together, keep those conversations honest and resolved in the end, I think that we can do a lot of good work.
When we hear the term caregiving, I don't think many of us think about kids taking care of their parents. We usually think about the elderly process. But in this documentary, Caregiving, Chris, you make it very clear how many children really are helping out and are caregivers. I know this is very important to you, and I'd like you to address that.
Thank you. Well, one of the problems is we don't actually know how big an issue it is. The figure that we use in the film of 5.4 million is the result of one of the best and only surveys of the extent of it, but it's widely acknowledged it's a vast undercount. And so one of the things I hope that happens is that by paying more attention to it, we actually get a sense of the true scale of the challenge. But there's also practical things that we can all help do and change in that space. And one of the ways in that I've been thinking about a lot is schools. One of the stories, we did 18 short films as well as the 2-hour film on WBGO.org, and one of them is set in a school in Rhode Island. And Rhode Island is the first state in the country that they've done a very simple thing. They just asked incoming middle school and high school students if they're caregivers. And what they found, they didn't know what they would find. But what they found was that in some schools, there are 40% of the student body is an active caregiver. And what does that mean? That means they're probably late for first period. Maybe they've got to take a younger sibling to the bus stop and wait for the bus to arrive and get them to school before they can go to school, so they're late. So then their teacher in first period is pissed at them. So they have this antagonistic relationship. Or they don't hand in homework and things like that. And so instead of getting any support, they're just getting detention and just have a terrible relationship with their schools. And which teenager is going to want to share that kind of information anyway? I mean, there's enough shame around adults and caregiving and silence, but for teenagers, it's even more so. And so, to me, when I heard about what they're doing, it just made so much sense. Like they didn't have the answers, but they knew enough and were courageous enough to just ask the question. And now they're starting to think about what they might be able to do, what supports they might be able to provide. And I could just imagine a situation where if 10 more school districts, if 100 more school districts, 1,000 more did that, in New Jersey, in New York, just, pick a state, just ask that one question. And so kids, instead of getting detention, were getting the support that they needed, were getting recognition, getting encouraged to talk about this and share this. Just imagine the benefits, not just for them, for the schools, for their peers, but also for their families. And it feels like something that is possible, that's within all of our grasps to help make happen, and could just radiate out and benefit so many millions of families. So it's something I had no idea about when I went into this project, and I've come out just thinking that, again, it's an instance where we don't have to rely on DC to do it. It's something that can happen through us pressing at a grassroots level, but by having a specific ask, a very simple ask, an ask that doesn't actually cost any money. Just ask the question and then see. And if it's not a big deal in your school district, in this particular school, that's fine, you don't have to do anything. But when it's 40, 50%, I think that's going to start making people ask serious questions about what is needed and how to support that group of kids.
I wish someone would have asked me.
I think that we're, in the school of social work, we see many people coming into that profession with a caregiving experience, caregiving concurrently, and we do our best to make that as attainable as possible, because we know the value, the lived experience they bring, and the impact they can have with an MSW. But I sort of just anecdotally, I'm inspired to maybe start asking some of my students. I'll report back. But I know many students who work a full-time job, who caregive for a parent or another family member or a child, and they're also balancing an MSW graduate level degree. And this is not a bold choice. Social work is providing the most mental health, but it is often, the last professionals to be brought into lots of different things. So I just had to add that. And I think, we need to start asking not only students and young people, but also workers and coworkers, and creating just a better space in jobs as well about the experience of caregiving, because it's so isolating. It's incredibly isolating, and it just shouldn't be that way.
I'm so glad you brought that up as well. I just wanted to add one thing there. We'll know about the social movement in the 60s and 70s and how that changed civil rights policies and within companies, and women's rights policies, childcare policies in companies. But today it's 2025, and there are too many corporations that still have just childcare policies. They don't have care policies. Very, very few have care policies. So just imagine, and one can start with places that one is working, and just ask them. WETA, so that is the TV station in DC, the PBS station in DC, that was the architect of this project, this caregiving project. They looked at themselves while we were making it, looked at themselves and realized that they didn't have that policy. So they, about 6 months ago, changed their own HR policies. That affects tens of thousands of people. And so, again, it's something that one can ask for, and it's a relatively simple thing to take a childcare policy and just say, well, if you're an older adult, then you can have a benefit too, or you can, if you're unable to use it yourself, then you can gift it to one of your colleagues. So if you have hours or days that you're not using, gift it to another colleague that can work. So again, simple things that can be life-changing for so many millions of families, and things that we can all do. They're all within our power to do.
Chris, what was the most surprising response you have got so far to those who have watched Caregiving?
I think to me that the most impactful thing has been this sense of being heard and seen. I think for so many, I want to say another thing about caregiving in a second, but for so many people who are living it, there is this profound feeling of isolation. And social media has helped in many ways. We see in Matt's story there how it helped him, and it's helped many, many caregivers, but there's still this sense of isolation that people don't understand, that it's embarrassing to ask for help, and that people who want to offer help don't necessarily know what would be useful. And so there's this gulf among families can grow, a gulf among close friends can grow. And so I'm hoping that what this does is empower people, make them feel heard, make them feel that while yes it is unique what they're going through, it's also universal. And that will enable more people to share in their workplaces, to share in their schools, to talk about it, and to bring this out of the shadows. And then I think once we've done that, then change will start to happen.
A lack of funding, a lack of policies. What angers you the most, Mary Martha, when you're watching the doc or just reality?
I'll share a story. So, we moved mom here, and we needed to fill out paperwork to get her onto the New Jersey State Medicaid. And if you don't know this, when you go into a nursing facility and you need to be on Medicaid, you can't have any money at all. They want to know everything about you and what you have done with your money in the last 5 years. That's called the look back. And so they wanted to know, was there a house? Did she ever own a house? And I said, yeah, but she hasn't owned that house in like 20 years. Well, we need to find out who owns it now. So I had to go and do the research and find that out. Then, did she ever have a savings account? Yes, she did, but the account's been closed for like 3 years. Well, we need to see the bank statements. Let me tell you about PNC. If the account has been closed for a while and you need to get the bank statements, you have to pay money for each bank statement. Now remember, I said that they look back 5 years. So they wanted to look back 5 years, and I had to get all of the bank statements. And so I spoke to the money person at the nursing home, and I said, let me get this right. You want me to spend her money to get bank statements to prove that she don't have no money. Repeat that back to me. Make it make sense. And so then I said some other curse words and what have you about what I was going to do and what I was not going to do with her money. That's what made me upset, the bureaucracy of it. How stupid that is. Yes. That you wanted me to spend over $100 to prove that she did not have any money. They will also take your life insurance policy. They take that too, if it's a whole life. They take it, and you have to spend it down. Yeah, until you have nothing. So that you can get the Medicaid. And then what happens when a person dies, right? Because older people typically get life insurance because they say, this is what you're gonna bury me with, right? And so then, let's say that that's what we were supposed to do with this life insurance policy. I had to turn it in. So now, where's the money to bury her? If that's what we were going to do, if that's what the beneficiary was going to do with the life insurance policy. Also, let me just say this. The beneficiary of the life insurance policy is not under any obligation to use that money to bury you. And I'm sure you have seen this before. Someone has run away with the money. I would encourage you to take care of your own, like if you want a funeral, or you want to be cremated or anything like that, I would encourage you to take care of that on your own and make sure that that's already in place so that no one is arguing about the beneficiary and what they have done with the life insurance policy. Just, the more you know.
Dr. Snyder, there are family I should say, family discourse over these matters that Mary Martha was talking about can break families apart. You see it all the time, I'm sure.
Yes, I've definitely seen it in practice. It's very unfortunate, but as Mary Martha said, it's so critical as a way to hopefully avoid that situation is to have these conversations sooner. But what that means is often confronting pain and loss. And, you know, within a family, maybe these conversations have never been had in generation to generation to generation. So then we're talking about cycle breaking on top of it. So it's not as easy as it sounds, of course, but it can happen, unfortunately, where families might siblings, adult children might not speak to one another over decisions that have been made in crisis. So I always say it's really best to try to avoid that when we can with any sort of advanced planning, care documents, things of that nature. It's not easy to talk about by any means, but it also can preserve the voice of the person throughout their life. And also, you know, when parents or grandparents or family members say, I don't want to be a burden, I don't want to be a burden, this is kind of a way to address that. I don't like to use that language at all, but if there is a concern, you know, it's sort of a way to jump into a conversation about planning for the future.
But to come to terms, right, to come to terms with your own mortality.
Oh, it's tremendous. That's why, you know.
Because you hear, well, I don't want to talk about that because I still have a lot of life to live.
Oh.
And then the children don't want to talk about it because I don't want mommy or daddy to die. So we're just not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then when the stuff hits the fan,
Yeah.
now we're going to yell and scream at each other.
Now we're not talking.
And now we're not going to talk again.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that don't make no sense.
And then the Medicaid person comes and says, you've got to spend it all down.
Yes, you have to spend it
Because
all
Medicaid's not
down.
going to help you.
Yes, and you have to show the receipts of what you spent the money on to prove. Yeah. And then, if you're in a nursing facility, you get what's called a house account.
Right.
Okay, so you get a house account, and the money goes into the house account. So let's say if you were getting a pension or Social Security, that money goes into the house account. And then the nursing home takes all that money except for maybe like $20, $30. So then, if your family is in the position where they can, you know, put a little money on your books, right? You put in the money and you put in the money and you put the money in. Let me tell you what happens when you die. They take the money.
Yeah, the money.
They take the money. I didn't realize that is what would happen. So the money that I given my mom that she didn't spend because she wasn't getting her hair done, wasn't getting her nails done, I brought her home for hospice, and I said to myself, I'll make sure I take out that money. I'll take it out, not realizing that they were going to take it. They took that. My mother died February 29th.
Took it quick.
In the afternoon of February 29th, I swear to you, that money was gone by 9 p.m. I'm being facetious, but I'm sure that they take it. They took it very quickly. Because the week after I called, I said, so walk me through the process of how I'm supposed to get this money. Oh no, the state took it. So then me and the social worker had to have a come to Jesus meeting. So you mean to tell me this whole time that I was here talking to you about how I was moving my mom from the nursing home back home with me for hospice, it never dawned on you to just say, hey, so the money in the P&A account, the state's going to take it, so maybe you should take it. Because I could have used that money to help to bury her. I could have used that money to help with all of the supplies that I needed for hospice. Because hospice doesn't give you bed sheets.
Imagine being on the other line of the phone with Mary Martha Ford,
Oh, I had to get them all the way together.
right? When she's on the phone, tell her I'm not here right now. Because you're tough,
It
right?
just shouldn't be this way.
No.
No, I just shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
And in the documentary, Chris, without giving everything away, there is another ridiculous case involving hospice care that you'll want to, you'll see it right away in the doc, on somebody getting too healthy and being penalized for not passing away soon enough. So, that's...
Yeah, because you get on hospice care, and then if you live too long, is it 6 months? Past 6 months, then they kick you off.
Yep.
And then you don't, then the resources that you have and the services that you were getting, you no longer get. And then you have to recertify. So they put you back into palliative care. And then you have to recertify to be put back on hospice. But don't live past 6 months.
Chris, there is a way to share stories, personal stories. Tell us about where they can go and what you're looking for.
So, thanks, sir. So there's a one of the things we found that blew me away was that we last fall we made a small announcement that this film was coming out. I've done this 1,000 times, and to be honest, it's like dropping a pebble in an ocean. You do it because you have to, and no one pays any attention, and that's fine. So we did it for this film, just a small announcement last October, and the next day, I swear, we just started getting emails and handwritten letters, and people finding us on social media, people on LinkedIn, finding physical addresses, writing notes. The outpouring from ordinary people all across the country, just people wanting to be heard, wanting to share their stories, was so moving to all of us. We built I think of it as a story wall, where people can share their own experiences. And we know that there's between 50 and 100 million adult family caregivers in this country. So that's basically, if it's 100 million, that's basically every family, that's basically every household in this country. So it's everywhere. I mean, it truly is the universal story. And so we built a story wall, share your caregiving story, and Bradley shared one, many people have shared them, there are thousands already up there, and people are welcome to do that if they're inclined. There was another part of your question?
Well, yeah, just make sure they have the website. They're also
Yeah.
going to share the stories. But since you mentioned Bradley Cooper, it never hurts to have people like Uzo Aduba be the narrator and have Bradley Cooper as executive director helping you out. But as we've said, we're all impacted by this. So I imagine Bradley and Uzo came aboard quite easily.
I mean, Uzo's story is your story. You know, there's daughters and sons. The daughters took care of the mom, and then all the sons took care of the dad. And it's a story that she lives profoundly. It happened as her career was taking off, and she was really fortunate to have employers that were supportive of her and enabled her to fly back and provide the care for her mum. But it's a life-changing experience, and so when we reached out to her, she said it was the easiest yes she'd ever had. And we've been so grateful to her and to Bradley, because there's just so much noise around and everything competing for our attention, notifications pinging in here and there, and just having people who with grace and dignity and wisdom and insight and a personal connection that help bring the story like this into everyone's homes is just, well, we're just so deeply grateful to her.
We only have a few minutes left, but I want to give each of you a chance for a final thought. Dr. Snedeker, we'll go to you first.
You know, what just came to mind as you were speaking, Chris, was just research and experiences I've had that kind of mount up to a caregiver identity. And I just want to thank you for sharing your story and for this film, and to acknowledge all the caregivers in the room for your experiences and everything that you do. And also just recognizing that I truly feel like once a caregiver, always a caregiver, like this stays with you forever. And it touches your life and others' lives forever. But I just want to honor everyone who's in it. And thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Snedeker. All right, Martha Ford, throughout the past just hour that I've spent with you, I have so much respect for you.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts?
My final thought would be, being a child caregiver was not fair. And it's okay for me to say that. It does not mean that I did not love my mother. I loved my mom. but being the child caregiver was not fair. It was what I was charged to do. That's what the Creator wanted me to do. And it was an honor and privilege to serve my mother up until she took her last breath. It was an honor and privilege to do so. And now, my life begins.
Chris Durance, a lot of people don't realize how much work went into this documentary. This was many years. It was before the pandemic. You shot a little bit before, you shot some during the pandemic, but most of the film and most of the doc that we saw basically happened around 2024. You could have done anything. You know, when you're a two-time Emmy Award winner, Peabody Award winner, you could pick the topic. You picked the right one, sir.
Thank you. But more importantly, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for engaging with us. Happy to speak to anyone afterwards. I mean, this is why I do it. Because of you and because of what we collectively can do with this and the change that we can all bring about. That's all.
So we want to thank a few people here before we close out. Stephen Tavigan is one of the people responsible for putting this panel together. Stephen, where are you? There he is, down here. Thank you so much. Margot Tavigan, thank you very much for filming tonight, so everyone gets a chance to see it. WBGO Scott McCraw. Scott, are you still in the room? There he is. Thank you so much. Ron Shirley, who you met, the director of the Media Center here at Express North. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Once again, the documentary Caregiving will be premiering on 330 PBS stations on June 24th, but you can see it right now at pbs.org and you can contribute to the wall of stories. So on behalf of WBGO, I'm Doug Doyle. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks to our panelists. You inspire each and every one of us with your work, and we thank you so much for that, and thanks for being here this evening. Everyone, have a safe trip home and enjoy Caregiving.